My name is Joel Espelin. I'm an analyst at TDG, which is a kind of a boutique analyst firm focusing on this space, broadband TV. TV is an app space, tdgresearch.com if you want to check it out. And so the title of our panel today is The Business of TV as an App. For those of you checking out between the different tracks, this is sort of the business track. We have a really good panel for you today, and hopefully it should be an interesting discussion. I'm going to kind of sit with these guys to try to make it as interactive as possible, chime in with some of my own thoughts, I guess, as well. But we'll try to keep it as informal, as interactive as possible. I think we don't have a microphone, but we have a small room, so just speak up and we'll repeat the question for those watching online as well. So again, just quick introductions. Again, I'm Joel Espelin. Down here on my left, I have Emil Rensing, Chief Digital Officer at Epix, the pay TV channel. Also here to my left, we have Seth Metch, VP of Digital Media Council at A&E here in New York, right, Seth? To my right, I have Matt Durgan, Director of Smart TV Content at LG. So we have a Smart TV platform guy here with us. And down here, Scott Rosenberg, VP of Biz Dev, Content and Services at Roku. So I guess we have sort of the device and platform guys here to the right, content guys to the left, with me refereeing in the middle in case any fights break out.
It worked out well.
Yeah, I guess that was not intentional. So just very quick for folks who are new to this topic. As we talk about the business of TV as an app, I think we're moving from a world in which we only had one or two apps. We had Netflix and YouTube, basically that was it, right? To where now we have really a proliferation of apps, and not just classic OTT apps, but existing television providers, both channel providers like these guys, as well as MVPDs also doing their own apps. Obviously, we have a huge success of folks like HBO Go with their app. We have different business models taking place with apps. The original guys were mainly paid services. Now we're seeing a lot more ad-based services also involved in the app space. Obviously, we have TVE and authentication we can talk about. And obviously, we have a huge growth in platforms. So smart TVs, also what we call, at least in TDG speak, sort of internet set-top boxes or accessory boxes like what Roku provides, although they're also doing some work with TV providers as well. So we really have a maturation, I would say, of the TV as an app space, really grown by also growth, remember, not just in the TV category, but also smartphones and tablets are huge in terms of video apps as well. So that sort of by way of overview. We'll try to get into some interesting sort of topics and controversies, large and small, that exist in this area. So maybe just by way of intro those, maybe tell us something interesting that you're working on right now. Start down here with Emil.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective at Epix, being the newcomer into the premium TV space, we really try to focus on platform parity, trying to keep everything available online as long as possible. In fact, at the moment, and actually pretty much since we launched the business, we have more assets and more titles available online than any of our other platforms. And that's an effect of, cable set-top box, SVOD limitations, as well as there aren't enough hours in a month to air everything we have under license. And we're really the only ones in the space that do that. We have more of our programming online than on other platforms. So from our perspective right now, our big push is in different ways to solve discovery problems, different ways to surface library programming. Much like the challenges of someone like a Netflix that's very focused around personalization, we take more of an active role in the programming side of things. So, launching linear feeds of programming online that are very genre specific, that are user customizable, things of that nature. So that's really where we spend a lot of our time these days from a feature perspective.
Hi, Seth from A&E, and I guess for those of you not familiar with A&E Networks as a company, we're A&E Networks History Channel, Lifetime Network, Lifetime Movie Network, Military History, Biography Channel, and Crime Investigation Network. And actually, the Biography Channel is being rebranded this summer as the FYI Network. I've been working a lot on app development on various platforms. We support the TV Everywhere model, where we have a certain amount of free content available to promote viewership and promote tune-in, and then people can use their credentials from their cable or satellite provider to be authenticated and watch a much deeper, piece of library of programming. And we are on a lot of platforms. We have our own websites. We're on the carrier websites and apps. We are currently on Roku, which I did work with Scott on. We're on Apple TV. We are on iOS, Android, and we're in a lot of places. And I think the most interesting thing we've done recently is, I think it was just for A&E, and we're rolling it out, but for authenticated users on apps, in addition to the on-demand stuff, which is what we launched with, we now actually stream the channels live, so you can actually watch live TV on your device.
With authentication.
Yeah.
So over to Matt. What's exciting right now at LG?
Yeah, so smart TV has a few differences, with other devices. First, because we are the actual glass that's on the wall, I think there's a lot of responsibility on our side to work with multiple devices, work seamlessly with multiple devices. So there are things that we're doing right now with Connect SDK, where we're creating seamless connections with multiple devices, multiple platforms. And then there's also things we're doing with ACR, where we're giving the capability of having interactivity. We announced Showtime launched their interactivity last year, and we're continuing to work with other networks to launch their interactivity. So between working with second screen devices to bring experiences on the TV, or partners like Showtime or even Bloomberg Sports, where we're going to launch interactive elements directly on the screen while you're watching whatever, HDMI or OTT or anything like that. That's kind of the focus for smart TV these days.
Scott, I just saw your new device down in the demo room. It's very cool. So what are you guys excited about right now in terms of new apps that we're going to see on Roku?
You're talking about the streaming stick launched
Yeah.
last month? Yeah. Well, that's certainly one of them. We launched a new form factor streaming stick that sells for $49. Comes with a remote. It's a great little device. I'm part of the part of Roku that does all the content deals, and my personal responsibility is making sure partners are successful when they come onto the platform, whether that's acquiring subscribers, driving transactions, driving stream counts. I've worked on the A&E deal. I've worked on Epics. I think a lot of what is focusing us these days are the benefits and challenges that come with scale. We've shipped 8 million devices in the U.S., and the majority of those are active on a monthly basis. The average Roku set-top box is doing 14 hours per week per device. So we're starting to edge up on kind of top 5 MVPD distribution footprint. And we have over 1,200 apps on the platform today as well. And so a lot of what we're focused on as a company is, when you have a footprint and usage that's over, last year we did 1.7 billion hours of viewing, you start to have these kind of behavioral cohorts crop up, and we're no longer a little company where we could sort of treat all our users the same. We have to really sit down and think about, who is the History Channel audience, who is the Epics audience, who is the WWE audience, and how do we market to them? How do we get them to subscribe or authenticate? It's a high class problem to have, but it's a very interesting problem. And thankfully, as an IP set-top box, we've got more tools at our disposal to segment and target users than you might have in a cable environment.
So let's talk a little bit about the audience, right? Sort of how big this audience has gotten, and let's start over here to the left with Emil and Seth. So you guys are obviously supporting apps across all platforms, right? Phones, tablets, everything. So not just TVs. So we'll have a little bit of a definitional question we can grapple with as we go. But when you're talking first about all platforms, Emil, maybe start with you. How big is the broadband audience or the app audience gotten from Emil? How important is it for Epics today? How big a portion of it, as you said, in a sense, you have more of your content on broadband, but how how big of a piece of the overall audience is it today?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we are not an ad-supported channel. We're a subscription product, so we don't really spend a lot of time in a lot of the traditional advertising metrics. A, because it's expensive, and B, we're been on the air for 4 years, so ain't nobody got money for that. However, from a pure technical usage perspective, we see very bimodal patterns of user behavior. In the limited research that we have done, we are the youngest folks in the premium pay TV space by about 12 years. So our average viewer is about 12 years younger than what you see on your average HBO or Showtime customer. And there's really nothing average about that average. If you look at the set-top box and the linear television usage, it lines up almost perfectly with the rest of the premiums in the space. But when you start taking a look at the online usage, that really brings that average down. And there's a lot of theories as to why my kids have their Xboxes and my kids have their iPhones and the devices are there and they don't have a cable box in there. So you can look at it holistically, but the truth of the matter is, from my perspective, I always try to think about the revolutions in media that have come before us. The evolution of AM into FM and the FCC mandates of changing the simulcasting model, right? The AM broadcasters were picking up the FM spectrum just because, and then they were simulcasting. The FCC rolled in and said, nope, you can't simulcast anymore. So all the cool shit on FM radio happened after midnight, right? They found the cheapest stuff they could put on the air, and that was the stuff that you hear Bob Pittman talk about it and Fred Seibert, the guys that were at the forefront of MTV. They talk about how they used to listen to FM radio after midnight under their blanket at night so no one could hear them, right? And it was just different. It was their own thing. You think about the Napsterization of music. My parents had great hi-fi systems, and I'm sitting there downloading MP3s that sounded like crap. But you know what? It was mine. It was in the place where I wanted it, and that's was great. So for us, as we look at the broadband audience, we kind of sit down and say, all right, well, maybe it's big, maybe it's not. Maybe people are cutting their cable cord, maybe they're not. And we can argue data in every direction. The cable industry has very interesting machinations. A disconnect and a reconnect is not a moved customer. It's a disconnect and a reconnect. So the churn numbers are a little bit out of whack. So we really spend a lot of time looking at the data. Our performance on Roku is astronomical. It's mind-bogglingly big. I'll be perfectly honest, we didn't have a whole heck of a lot of expectations for the platform. We launched because it was easy, and we were both willing to take the time to do the work. And when we looked at the usage after the first 30 days, we're like, holy crap. The conversions on free trials were enormous. Activation and usage of live stream is ridiculous. So from my perspective, I don't care how big it is. All I know is that it's big enough, and it's growing, and it's the place where you're seeing the evolution and you're seeing the growth of the audience. So regardless of what that business model is, we're in the TV everywhere space, just like Seth. And as long as we can afford to deploy these apps, manage our presence on these platforms, and our customers say, "Yo, we want this," we're there.
I like that you brought up radio because I worked at Sirius Satellite Radio before I worked at A&E, before it launched, and no one knew what it was. So just like now, I had to explain why you should pay for radio, which was tough. But then we signed Howard Stern, and everyone was happy. So we, unlike you guys, are in the ad-supported business, and we have ads are a big part of our revenue model. So it's interesting for us is what we do want to make sure is, the cable TV, pay TV ecosystem is very good for a company like A&E with a big bundle of channels that a lot of people watch. But we make a lot from advertising, and right now Nielsen measures linear advertising, not really on demand in terms of ad sales, and people pay more for television advertising. So I think what we need to make sure is that sort of financial model that enables us to create content, that we're able to shift it that way. And we've been very aggressive, I think more aggressive than most of the ad-supported networks in getting on new platforms, because it is important to us that, especially the younger viewers, as you mentioned, this is where they want to watch TV. They don't want to go through the cable box. They don't want to go through the menu. They like apps, and that's where we want to get it to them. We have found, we don't release our statistics as a private company, but yeah, people like watching it on the big screen. People liked watching it on their iPhone, but they really do like watching on the big screen. And the ease of use of getting to programming on a smart TV or on through Roku box or some of the other platforms we're on, is like Xbox. People really want to get there and want to watch it. And we support the authentication model, so we keep the same there is a free bucket of content across our networks that is available to anyone, and then whether you go to our website or you go to any of our apps. Then behind the wall, once you log in, you get that much deeper catalog and starting to be the live streaming. So what we do is we really want to get the content to all of our viewers everywhere, but sort of preserve the model that enables us to create content.
So Seth, just a quick follow-up, and we'll jump over to the platform guys. So what are you running in terms of ads on your apps today? Are you doing a C+3?
Well,
and then moving to a dynamic ad insertion after the third day, or are you doing ads from the beginning?
We're working on DAI and implementing, but this sort of it is right now on the on-demand. It's different ads than it is.
So
on
currently
TV.
currently on demand, you're doing pure connect to a separate ad server, run separate online ads.
And I believe that our ad salespeople are actually selling online. I think they're calling it the fifth day part.
So they're going to
And they're selling it as a separate day part.
It's your digital
It's very
team
clever.
Right.
primarily, right?
Yeah,
Not
the
your
digital
TV
team.
that's
Digital team is
it.
selling a fifth
Yeah.
day part, and that's the online.
Okay. So
This is very clever.
We're sort of a lot still in the testing phase. Obviously, like everyone, you want to move to more dynamic stuff, but a lot of it depends on how Nielsen's going to measure and how ad buyers are going to buy, and we're going to go the way that the ad buyers want because that's how we monetize the ads.
What are you doing today? Simulcast?
Yes, and with some level of blackouts and other things based on rights issues.
So we will come back to that. So jumping back over to Scott, based on the comment earlier from Emil about sort of huge viewing of epics on
Thank
Roku.
you, Neil.
No,
Nice flex.
not to be a jerk about it. I
Pay
mean,
you
we
later.
were really surprised.
But where I want to go with that, Scott, from you guys though, is that sort of TV on the Roku,
Yeah.
right? I mean, versus video on the Roku, right? And so, how are you seeing that evolution? I was just down there playing with the demo. I'm seeing a sort of more TV content, I would call it, meaning more incumbent legacy players than ever on Roku. What are you guys seeing in terms of usage? How big is TV on Roku becoming, and how do you guys see that fitting into the mix?
Yeah, the authenticated experiences for us are a big strategic focus. I mean, you can't short the big brands like History Channel and the huge audiences and great content that they bring to over the top. And it's not an accident that a bunch of our TV Everywhere partners are starting to register in our top 10 apps, even though they don't authenticate in all cases against all MVPDs. So they can't even reach the full Roku audience, and yet they're driving such engagement that they're getting into top 10 status for us. So it's a big focus for us to get TV Everywhere experiences on the platform. We've got the A&E properties, we've got Epix, we've got Showtime, HBO, ESPN, the Disney properties, Fox Now, and a pretty deep pipeline of additional TV Everywhere apps coming. Time Warner has a really innovative app on Roku today. If you're a Time Warner sub, you can authenticate with your credentials and get 300 live linear channels plus an on-demand experience. That's also an extremely popular app, also only available in 10-15% of our homes. So, that's why you're seeing it show up more, Joel, because there's a great offer there for users.
So a quick follow-up on that I think is sort of the elephant in the room around that one. Just a quick, I guess, poll. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any MVPDs blocking authentication on a phone today, or blocking authentication on the iPad. Haven't heard of that happening on any MVPD in the country. Hear a lot about MVPDs not authenticating devices that hook up to the TV. Whether it's Apple TV, whether it's Roku, Fire TV. Where are we at in that process? What do those discussions look like? Scott, when you try to talk to your friends at the MVPDs, why are they not authenticating that app, and what's going to cause them to change?
I mean, that conversation largely sits between our programming friends and the MVPDs, and those are big multi-billion-dollar agreements that are being traded. I think there's been increased for MVPDs, and they're not all the same, right? They're across the spectrum in terms of their progressiveness and readiness to authenticate. But I think the mobile device, the tablet device, MVPDs have perceived that as less threatening.
Sure.
than a device that puts them on the very same 50-inch screen, just on a different input. We're starting to see that loosen up. So DirecTV's started to authenticate a bunch of apps on Roku. Comcast's authenticating ESPN and Disney properties and Fox. And so I think you'll see a lot of movement there. It's just like everything else in that business. It's just a little slower moving.
Can I sort
yeah,
of
go
ask
ahead,
this
jump in.
question? This is a question I've asked a whole bunch of times to different people and never gotten an answer. As I've looked at this, is I don't know, do the MSOs make money off of the set-top box rentals or not? I don't know if that's something that they lose money on or they make money on, or if it's their business or it's a hassle. Because I had always suspected, looking forward, and every time I look at the future, I'm wrong, but that we would move more to, the MVPDs working their system in with other devices. Because if this was a burden and they lost money and they have broken boxes and shipping boxes and installing boxes, it seems to me like they'd love to get out of that business. And if they could deliver sort of their whole, I know on my, I think, Samsung TV, I do have a FiOS app that has a limited amount of content. That if they could deliver the channel guide and sort of the set-top box experience through an app on a platform, then why would they want to stay in the set-top box business?
Let's bring Matt in here. That's sort of a perfect segue to LG. I know, though, also for you guys, you started with, maybe again the app was YouTube or something. You couldn't get it all right, but as you see the discussion unfolding here is increasingly it's about TV,
Sure.
right? It's about TV and it's about these big branded apps. So to Seth's question in particular, so sort of when are we going to see that full lineup of apps on LG? What's the role? Can you guys replace the set-top box?
Well,
At least in the bedroom, maybe, as the second TV.
I'm not sure it should be the goal of the smart TV to replace the set-top box. I don't know what the set-top box means going forward in tomorrow's audiences. I think, from an LG perspective, we're very happy with our partnerships. We get a ton of activity. Our partners are very excited about being on our platform. And I think with HTML5, a lot of the technology has gotten pretty simple for people to kind of keep it up. And I always tip my hat to the companies that were early on with us because they went through a C+ to a Flash to an HTML transition and kept their platforms running through all of it, to get some scale. So I think there's a lot with that. And in particular to MVPDs, we've launched Dish and we've launched FiOS, and Dish did replace their set-top box with the application that's on our platforms. And I think VOD is a big model for them. They do make money on it, so I don't think that that's going to go away. And I do believe that as the whatever perceived or real threat there is of a content source like an OTT app going direct onto a smart TV, I think that as that starts to subside and that fear either forces change or becomes realized with an acceptance, then I think it'll all work out.
So are you seeing some of these same authenticated apps on LG today? Do we have authenticated apps?
Well, we have the MVPDs that I just
Right.
mentioned. So
but any of the
that's-
content guys?
No.
Do you think there's a reason why we're going to see that, or we're not seeing that?
I think we'll start seeing that start to open up within the next 12 months or so. I think there's a time period where you'll launch platforms that won't seem quite as in your face like a smart TV is, and then I think it'll start to open up after that.
So Emil, back to you on this one. Thoughts first. Would you guys support smart TVs today? Why are we not? And second, when you're talking to your MVPD partners, again, as a pure pay guy, you don't have an ad conflict. I would think, again, from what you're saying about Roku, that you'd absolutely want them to authenticate all these devices.
Yeah, so from a smart TV perspective, we support a couple of different platforms. I think there's been a lot of evolution and change in the smart TV footprint. And again, we're a small company. We're under 80 people. So it's kind of hard for us to chase every platform. So in the smart TV space, we've kind of waited for people to kind of consolidate and figure stuff out. You know, a lot of the manufacturers come in with these very grand plans, and then they realize they can't afford to actually operate the infrastructures that they're putting together from a promotional basis. So there's just, it's sort of like web publishing in the mid-1990s, right? It was really fucking complicated. And the smart TV platforms tend to have that same thing right now, where it's just so complicated. It's just, you know, so we're just kind of sitting that one back a little bit. From an MVPD perspective, we're universally distributed, and I think that's kind of key. You know, we don't have any device holdbacks. We don't have any platform holdbacks. You know, when we talk with our operators, you know, those guys look at us to help them solve some of these challenges and put a product out there that makes sense. I've never worked for an operator. I've never had a job with an operator. I don't spend a heck of a lot of time talking to the operators, but you know, when you run into those situations where people don't want to do something, it's usually because of something totally unrelated to that issue that they're trying to get from you that you don't want to give them. So they're not going to give you something in exchange for you not giving them something. So until you guys come to terms on whatever that thing is, no one's going to get anything. So there's a little bit of that kind of goes on at that MVP level. Scott alluded to that. You know, when you're dealing with these kinds of big distribution deals, it might not be the most obvious thing in the room. We've heard point blank from operators that, you know, from the ops side, the one operator we have a deal with would save $4 billion a year in expense if they didn't have to roll trucks and put boxes in houses. You know, why would you not want to do that? But at the same time, you know, the operators like control. You know, they like to control that experience. They like to control that UI. They don't want to have things next to their you know, there's all sorts of issues that go into there. So, you know, there's bigger issues that come to pass. You know, I remember a while back there was some debate between the folks at Viacom and one of the cable operators about iPad delivery in the home via Wi-Fi. And you know, I don't really know how that resolved, and I don't really know what the real beef of that is, but if you look at the service definition of some of their networks, it includes words like coaxial cable. It's what's in the contract. It says it's delivered to your home via coaxial cable. So where's the Wi-Fi grant in there? You know, there isn't one. It's not specified. You know, so there's a lot of that stuff that happens that doesn't necessarily make sense. But you know, think about it this way: 0% of us would have DVR functionality in our cable boxes if TiVo and Replay TV didn't exist. Right? They didn't innovate that. They didn't champion that. They didn't create it. They didn't invent it. They saw an opportunity in the market to compete against somebody trying to create this new service, and they did what they had to do to maintain the presence of their set-top box in the living room. And you know, I love my TiVo. I'm a TiVo customer. I buy my TiVo. I pay for my TiVo service. But you know, some of these DVRs from guys like Verizon, you know, they're great products. But don't think that innovation wouldn't have happened if someone didn't force them into doing it. So there's a little bit of that in that dynamic as well.
So let's talk a little bit about windowing, or the classic kind of content availability issue. You know, again, I think as this industry began, it was sort of, the notion was either it was going to be OTT content, meaning original to web content, or it was going to be back library content. Again, I think one of the things we've seen more recently is the window collapsing and new shows becoming available online, you know, sort of at or as they're broadcast on the traditional channels. We see that both from folks like HBO, but also folks like Netflix. Maybe Seth, you can weigh in first on this one. How do you guys think about that issue today? If a new show comes out, either a new episode or a new show, how do you think about promoting it online versus in the traditional linear? Is there a window?
I guess let's start with the concept of windowing and segmenting rights. And you know, TV has historically had windows and has segmented rights geographically, by time, and by device. And it's not like a game or a conspiracy model, it's a financial model, it's a risk allocation model. So you're producing a big scripted drama where you can do 15 episodes with union actors, you know, on location. It's really expensive. So you decide, all right, you know, the network will have this window for the first run on TV in the US. We'll sell the international TV rights to someone else. We will sell, you know, the DVD rights to someone else. We'll sell, you know, later the online window and all that. And part of that is, all right, you get a lot of people who put in portions of money to finance this, and you spread the risk. And that's the reason why windowing exists. So, you know, a company like A&E and a scripted drama won't necessarily own all the rights to do everything in the same way, unless we find another way to manage risk and programming, because that's expensive. You see a lot less windowing on reality TV shows. So that was script dramas. The reality TV shows, which typically is a network, are not produced by a studio with union actors. It's something that's produced it's non-union. We own it. We have more of the rights. You see much less of the windowing, and we will put it, we will have it everywhere. So I think the difference is really making that risk allocation of financial model work to have it everywhere at once versus selling the segmentation.
So, but as these multiple platforms become more important to you, you're saying it almost creates an incentive for you guys to create more stuff like reality or more shows, at least in which you have greater control.
Yes, and it also makes sense, and I can't sort of tell exactly how we do it because we're a private company, but we work on the model. We work at other ways to spread risk, whether, just the way when you finance a feature film, you have a lot of partners involved. So you may keep the rights together and find another way to get things.
Right.
But the windowing is a result of how you finance the creation of programming. So as things become, as other platforms become more important, you have to find other creative ways to finance programming so that you can spread the risk, because we produce a lot of programming. If we took all the risk on all of our programming, it's not how you run a business.
Well, you couldn't afford it, but on the other side of the equation, if the ad model, God forbid, changes and your TVE apps start outpacing your broadcast, your windows are going to change.
Yes.
They have to.
Yes,
Right.
and if hopefully the ad revenue from online will catch up and be something huge. And yet, right now, as a business, we're best off when people watch linear TV on their cable box. That's how we're best off. That's how we make the most money. That's how we sell the most profitable ads. Hopefully with dynamic ad insertion and retargeting and all these things where we can customize more, those ads in the digital platforms will become much more valuable. And then we can, those will monetize better.
So let's turn down here again, maybe first to Scott, and we'll come back to Matt. So Scott, what are you guys seeing today in terms of, I would say, usage of newer content versus library content? Again, the anecdotes we see is, when the HBO True Detective or episodes come out, new episode on Amazon comes out, huge spikes in viewing, right on the new content.
Serving platforms break.
Yeah, more similar, but more similar to actually what we see even on traditional linear platforms, right? A lot of demand for new content as we see more original content versus library. How is that evolving? You see with that within the Roku world? Are you seeing those same trends?
I mean, we have only, I would say, partial insight into what users are doing down in our partners' apps. That's their proprietary information.
Okay.
We don't necessarily see that, but we do have partners who share that, and we, not surprisingly, it's the high-profile new releases that drive dominate the movie store apps on Roku. Lego Movie or something comes to home and it dominates, or it's the release of a new episode, or the start of a new season of Game of Thrones. So that drives a lot of our usage. We're just to go back to Seth's comment about windowing. One of the problems we're interested in is in a binge viewing mindset. How do you help the user find what they're looking for? If you haven't, I'd strongly suggest you go back to something like Breaking Bad, or I'm watching The Americans right now, and just try to start from the beginning and work your way all the way to current, and just as a consumer, try and figure out where you can go get that content and the tools you might use to rationalize that. We've introduced a universal search to help with that. Oh, I can get this episode here and this episode here. But to an average consumer, even somebody who's in the business, I figured out that I was like buying a couple extra episodes of The Americans when I could have been watching it for free on Fios in my house. And I work in the business. I work on this all day long. So that's a really interesting problem I think we all need to set about solving, is how to sort of flatten the landscape and not have the windowing interfere with what the consumer wants.
Matt, any thoughts from you guys on search and discovery?
Well,
from
yeah,
LG
search and recommendation have been part of our platform for a few years now, and I think that's definitely one of the key focal points for our company, because discoverability of content is important. To go back to your original point, though, your original question, I think the other point that we should recognize is, Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon all came out with original programming within the last, 12 to 18 months. So let's not forget that, it's not that, I don't think you should look at the OTT space as library, right? I think the OTT space has actually evolved quite a bit in the last couple of years. So I think that's pretty relevant as well.
No, absolutely. So would you guys consider searching, similar to what we saw in Google TV, would you include searching across?
Yeah, universal search, absolutely. Just
across
like,
the traditional pay
just like
TV?
Scott said.
Okay.
Yeah, well, actually, we would do searching across the pay TV as well.
Okay.
We did license Tribune
Right.
data as well to accomplish that. And the new frontier for everybody is recommendation.
Right.
How possible is it to take a device which is probably consumed by 3 or 4 very different tastes and and recommend relevant content at the right time. So I think that's kind of the big frontier for us right now.
Now, do you also see the industry going to sort of an HDMI pass-through? Are you doing input one? What's your take as the TV provider on this input one issue here? We hear constantly about what in terms of the viewer having to change sources to go to their Roku or to go to their pay TV box.
Well, LG, we have a little bit, like I said in the beginning, we have a different responsibility. It's important that we work well with the Roku box and the Xbox and the set-top box, and all those devices need to work very well on our devices. So that's why we developed WebOS, and we made an investment last year where we purchased WebOS from HP, and then we just launched that platform in March this year. And what WebOS does is it makes it seamless to switch from HDMI 1 and 2 to Netflix and YouTube and Spotify and Facebook. So, our goal with WebOS was to make an operating system which allows consumers to just move very quickly from all their content, whether it's from the HDMI port or the USB port or the OTT, over the top. So, so that was the goal of WebOS. And if you've read the reviews from critical reviewers about it, we've accomplished that. So now we've given the tool for consumers to seamlessly switch. So now they get to choose, where they want to get their content.
So back to Scott, I got to ask on that one, and then we'll head back down here. How do you think that through, Scott? On one hand, you say that sounds like great news for Roku. You've got seamless sort of input switching. At the same time, LG's obviously got some services on there that, obviously there's some major competition going on with what a Roku can provide as well. How do you guys see yourself playing with the smart TV guys going forward?
Well, at CES this year, we announced our first couple of TV OEM integrations. So TCL and Hisense, which are the number 1 and number 2 TV manufacturers in China, and between the two of them, build 20 million TVs a year, will be integrating the Roku operating system this year. So you'll take one of these TVs home. Each manufacturer will have a couple of SKUs, and it'll boot right into a Roku co-branded experience. You'll get everything you're used to on Roku plus linear TV switching. So we're going to play directly in the TV, the glass part of the business as well, because we think we have something to add there. But as Matt said earlier, we don't look at the set-top and TV business as an either-or. We think we'll do a better job of sustaining a TV OS and having it live longer, but ultimately the set-top clock speed is faster. And so 2-3 years from now, you may want to upgrade or switch to a latest generation box. And so that's still an important area for us as well.
So jump back down to Emil for a second. Original content, right? It does seem like everyone's got originals today, not just the traditional OTT guys, but as we mentioned, but even the platform guys, right? Not just Amazon, but Microsoft. Lord only knows, I would expect Apple will do original shows or at least original content or concerts or something at some point. How do you guys see originals fitting into the future of Epix, and is it as important as people think it is?
Yeah, conveniently for us, Lionsgate announced at their earnings call late last year that we're doing originals, so go us. But to date, I don't think that that's necessarily a huge driver of demand for product, right? None of us are really in the content business. We're all in the hits business, and we're chasing those hits. And where we acquire them in their life cycle is largely a financial decision and a risk mitigation decision. From our perspective at Epix, we do a lot of original event programming. We do comedy specials, we do concerts, we got a lot of original documentaries. And that's really been helpful for us in starting to define our brand. And create a little bit of energy around what we do. Even though we are a premium pay network, we don't really function from a business the way an HBO or Showtime or a Starz does, which is why our price point is much lower than those guys, even though we have more original titles, more original movies than Showtime and Starz. So there's different reasons for doing originals. AMC has been incredibly lucky with their original slate. I really hope they can keep up the pace. The Americans, I think, is probably one of the best shows on television right now. FX has struggled with marketing that as a construct. For us, again, we're sort of lucky in the sense that we have Lionsgate as an equity partner in our business, and they're a hugely prolific producer of original television product. I'm really excited to see what those guys actually come up with for us. But not having original episodic television hasn't helped us or hurt us in closing the distribution deals we've got, or helped us or hurt us in engaging customers with the product that we're offering. It helps that we have great film product. Hunger Games I can't believe the usage of that thing. You'd think everybody would have seen it at box office when it was released, but we look at our own usage data, we look at our rent track data on set-top box, and we look at data we get from our OTT partners. It's like no one has seen this movie. Everyone's watching it now for the first time. It's absolutely incredible. So, I think that there are challenges in both directions. I don't think that Apple's going to get in the original television business. I'm just my gut reaction in conversations with those guys. I think they'll do things to make it look like they have original programming. The iTunes Music Festival that they do,
Sure.
I mean, that's it's cool. It's a great event. And
Beyonce.
exactly.
Let's be honest. Beyonce.
Yeah, but that's no different than an in-store promotion at Tower Records
Sure.
from 10 years ago. And no one would say that Tower Records was in the original content business. They could have been. They probably should have been. Maybe they'd still be in business. Who the hell knows? But again, from our perspective, it hasn't really been a driver. But that's not really what our business is today. It probably will be tomorrow.
So, moving on from that, let's talk a little bit about how we think about kind of brands and aggregation. I think it's an interesting. Actually, maybe we'll go back to you quickly because you just mentioned it. You guys obviously have a lot of opportunities of places you can go with your brand and your content. You could go direct to folks like LG we're talking about. You can go to Roku. You could also go to Netflix, which is essentially would be an aggregator. You can take your own brand even direct to the web. How do you think about that? Are there places? What role do you want to see for the Epix brand? What kind of deals would or wouldn't make sense for you guys from an aggregator standpoint?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think that the role of what a brand is in the television world is changing dramatically as it relates to the interactive world. We have a deal with Netflix. Netflix is one of our larger distribution partners. Every single new release you see on Netflix comes from us over here. We're the only ones that do that, the only ones that can do that, the only ones that are doing that. And that'll probably be the case for the next couple of years. And that gets back to the long, lengthy conversations of, I don't understand why some MSOs won't authenticate devices when it really has nothing to do with it. It's, the rights on that stuff is going to be tied up for a long time until those guys get things sorted. That's my prediction. So our stuff is unbranded on Netflix for a variety of reasons. They want us to put our brand up there. We haven't really done it at this point. Maybe that'll change over time. So who knows? But really the thing that I think starts to define the brand in the app world is the experience. The experience is really the thing that makes the brand work. Not to keep picking on the Roku guys. The Roku experience is what the Roku brand is, right? I know what that remote control does. I can pick up any app and I can whip through it and I can use the remote and I know it. And the people that love their Roku because of that experience. The people that love their Apple TV love their Apple TV because of that experience. So for us, yeah, you know what? We've got a promo department. I'm on the board of Promax. I mean, like marketing and branding and the packaging and the experience, all that stuff is very critical in that brand. But at the end of the day, the experience is really the key driver. And, we struggle all the time in, well, here's the rules of Roku, but here's what I want to do. Here's the rules of Xbox, but here's what I want to do. And, we realize that, we need to conform to the platform because we want to fit in a way that makes sense and not stand out as, the ugly duckling of the moment. And just finally on that brand perspective, and this is going to be somewhat counterintuitive, the truth of the matter is, as much as we want to create the experiences that are right at the right time, I don't really want to be in the experience business at all, even though I think it's the thing that it's a big element of what defines the brand. my vision for where we are, a year from now, if I don't have a publicly accessible API so that any, Tom, Dick, and Harry can show up at Epix, grab an API key and start indexing my titles and making them available on their service and grabbing my metadata and my poster art. I want everybody's universal search to be as best as it possibly can be. We're doing something wrong. So I think the challenge over the next year or two is really going to be finding that balance between data accessibility and availability and being able to go to Bing on my Xbox and search for a title and have it show up in 10 places, while at the same time knowing that the Roku experience is different than the Apple experience, which is different than the iOS experience, which is different than the LG experience, and everyone is going to have their pluses and minuses based on the input method, where it lives in the ecosystem, and what data and what information you want to consume on that device at any given moment.
Yeah, jump in here, Seth. That'd be interesting from Amy's perspective.
It's interesting. So we're a little different in terms of what our channel brands mean to us, because history hits a certain demographic, and we program that in a certain way. And Lifetime and A&E and Bio, which is becoming FYI, is and strategically we have a lot of program executives. I only 80 people. I'm like, wow. Our legal and business affairs department.
Yeah, it's staggering.
But they've all worked together, and our programmers who run the networks have moved around from network to network, and it's really a big team. And so we do look when we create program, or whether it's reality or scripted, is we have a good idea, and then we look which one of our network brands it fits in, because people do tune in to our channels, and that's important to us. The second piece that I agree with you on the platform is, for the most part, when our apps across different platforms, we want them to navigate and look similarly. We don't want someone who had a great experience with our app on their iPhone to then do it on Xbox and get turned off because they can't find anything and make it work. So it's sort of important for us to be able to implement things in a pretty consistent way across platforms, and that's why we stick with the platforms where we think we're going to get more users, because we can only support a certain amount. But we really want we want to retain our viewers, and we want to super serve our viewers and make it easy for them.
So Matt, quick question for you too. One, in terms of indexing metadata from services like Epic, so folks can find stuff. But second, also, Seth is saying, hey, he wants the history brand to show up, and the Lifetime and the A&E. Mm-hmm. What's the shelf space issue, right, within LG of being able to get all those brands exposed to the user or not?
I mean, I don't think the shelf space is any different than it would be for a set-top box,
okay.
Except, maybe we have, some alternatives, and I think one of the challenges for smart TV is it's not up to me or LG to take a set-top box and, put it into a smart TV. That solution exists, and, we're not planning for that solution to change. It's not in our control, so it shouldn't be something that something that we work on. But I think what we do focus on is, all right, we've got a great selection of video, and like Emil was saying, you could get Epix on Netflix, you can get HBO on Amazon now, Amazon Prime. So there's ways to get to pretty much every piece of content that you could want to get. What then the responsibility shifts to is, okay, so what else do people want to do with their TV? Do they want to listen to their Spotify account? Do they want to listen to Pandora? Do they want to be social? Do they want to do games? Should we do cloud gaming? And so some of these things are important as well. And I think if we wanted to just recreate the set-top box inside the TV, it certainly would be in our technical capability. But for us, if a partner comes to us and says, hey, we want to be on your platform, and we have this audience and we have this reach, and we think that we're going to be successful because we're going to provide great value to the consumers, then we're right there, ready to work on it. Sure. But I think it's important that we work with people that aren't kind of handcuffed in certain ways as well. I think it is a big challenge, going back to what Scott was saying, where it's hard for us to put a lot of technical resources into, a 15% of the market solution or a regionalized solution. It's not that we won't do it.
Sure.
It's just it takes a little bit more conversation and kind of vetting out between the parties.
Well, I think the big driver we've seen is that from the consumer's perspective, they may not expect to see the set-top on their smart TV, but they do increasingly expect to see their iPad on their smart TV. And if they can get all those brands on their iPad, they're increasingly, frustrated or beyond when they can't get those apps on other platforms. So, I mean, Scott, we'll let you jump in here.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about metadata for a second. How would you guys feel today about exposing sort of Roku channel metadata to, up the stack, to an LG, to a Google TV, or to other search engines that want to discover video content? Would you want Matt to be able to find, Roku show information that you guys have, or do you guys want people only searching on Roku?
I'm trying to imagine that use case here of how we'd collaborate there. But I mean, I think generally speaking, our partners are already doing a good job of distributing their metadata through partners like Tribune, and so I think we can be an agent of that by making sure that our platform has good discovery and browse features on it. I think just to kind of highlight and respond to some of the comments my colleagues have made here, I do think discovery is a real and pressing problem. We have over 1,200 apps on our platform. My team's whole job is helping partners get discovered. You can have iconic brands like History Channel and Duck Dynasty, and yet we still need to go to work to help help those channels get discovered. I used to run the program promotion business at TV Guide, and I remember George Schweitzer, who runs CBS Marketing, saying to me that he loves the EPG because it puts all of his content up front and center, and he hates it too because his row is just as big as everybody else's row. So discovery was a real problem, is a real problem in a 1,000-channel cable environment, and it's only exacerbated in a 1,000,000-channel over-the-top environment. We're at work on a bunch of different strategies to help break through that. I think one thing that is exciting is, in contrast to, say, Epix or History Channel, and where they really can only deliver one linear product formatted the same and tuned to by a channel number in a cable environment, now they have the opportunity to construct a user experience, right, and add that to their toolbox for differentiation. So when you go into an authenticated history experience, you actually can have a closer experience to their brand and their product vision and how you think you should consume their TV product. And that just wasn't possible in a cable environment. I think it's one of the exciting things about the evolution of the space.
As a great example, as someone who's a Game of Thrones fan, is it's a complicated show with a lot of characters.
Right. Yeah.
And when I first started watching it on TV, I found it difficult to follow.
Yeah.
And I switched to the app, and actually, unfortunately, they seem to have dropped this season. But in the first 2 seasons, on the HBO Go app, they show you could turn on this, and it was on smart TV and other platforms. I happen to be watching on my iPad mostly. Is they thing along the bottom at any time during the show, there was some conversation. There's a little tile that says, they discussed this, these 2 characters just had a similar discussion in episode 1 of season 4. And you could click there, and it would give you a 15-second video. Or it would remind you, someone's going on the attack. You could click on a thing, and it would expand and show you a map of where they are. And things like that, which made Game of Thrones took it from a show I couldn't follow to a show that I became so engaged in, is sort of within these, the apps and the smart TV and web experiences, adding in that interactive that explains and really gets you involved. Is a great thing.
I think you guys are being a little humble about your investment in the apps world, but both companies, Epix for many years now, and the A&E networks more recently, have significant resources put against building compelling consumer apps. And so, I really think it is a point of differentiation going forward for major media companies. Who's going to excel at presenting their brand in a new and innovative way to their user base?
There is a lot that goes into the planning and interface design of these apps. We don't just throw them up. Yeah. And we actually, the History app on iOS just won both the Webby and the People's Choice Award at the Webbies, which we were very proud of. That it meant people actually enjoyed the experience.
Well, and particularly given, as you said, the challenge, there are some challenges from the economic side, but you're pressing ahead anyway. And I think your Game of Thrones example is an example where, I think, to me, without a doubt, you have at least cases out there, not across the board, but you have cases where, without a doubt, the app experience is better than watching the linear show. I do think that's one of the issues that HBO had recently, is that the HBO Go experience, quite frankly, is better than watching HBO linear, and it's moving more of the audience than they think. Speaking of audience, we're happy to take questions here in the last couple minutes. If anybody's got anything, no microphone, so just speak up. Here in the middle with the pink shirt.
How do you see ESTs as an opportunity, as a new business model, and from a content perspective or platform perspective?
So the question for the video is basically the transactional or EST market, or sometimes people call it the sort of pay per download market. Any comment there? Is transactional a market for you guys at all?
Well, we're in the film business primarily from a distribution perspective, so we live very happily with very aggressive EST campaigns in both traditional home video and digital home video. It's really no factor for us.
It's an important part of our business. I think EST has a lot of taken over. We always have had a big DVD business with our networks. Even though DVD business has declined, we still have a large one, because when you talk about biography and history, we have a lot of documentary programming that people sort of want to own that box set. But we do make our episodes available on iTunes through EST and Amazon, and it's a great part of that that windowing, and it's part of that business.
Top Gear buyer over here.
EST is a huge, there's a lot of money flowing through our platform. We have half dozen movie stores, Vudu, Amazon, Redbox, Target, MGO on our platform. So there's tons of EST money today flowing through our platform. We're starting to see some networks experiment with the idea, if they own the content, doing EST. The studios are starting to become aware that they can come in and promote some of their titles. So there's a lot of activity, especially around the TV segment.
Yeah, we could do a whole panel on EST and talk about ultraviolet and coverage across multiple platforms with one purchase. Yeah.
Question here in front, the gentleman in the blue right here. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think it's a good discussion, especially about the TV and the box. And I'm from the best TV of China, and we are also the content service provider at OTT. I want to compare a number with, especially the gentleman from LG and the Roku here. In China, typically we serve the content of both the smart TV and OTT box. So our monthly usage rate for the device for the smart TV is typically around 10% plus or minus, which means other time people this TV used for connectable set-top box. They use the natural apps on the smart TV in China. The percentage is about 10 to 15%. But however, on the OTT box side, the set-top box side, what we see, the range can be anywhere between 30 to 70%. On the high end, 70% is for those that of our operator, MSO, the telecom operators. When they provide a box to subscriber, the monthly usage rate can be as high as 75%. People would use the box for watching the content, that we provide. So I have three numbers, about 10% for smart TV by itself, and OTT box on the high end is about 75%, lower end is about 30%. So I would carry this data to ask the two you gentlemen see what's the typical rate for smart TV, monthly usage rate for smart TV for LG and also the OTT box for Roku.
Yeah. So are you comparing? What's the set-top box in China look like? It's not a Roku box, right?
Box.
It's a Roku box.
Yeah, no.
Well,
Many
it's an IP
we are
box.
one of them. So it's like a Roku OTT box.
It's not a set-top
No,
box
it's
from
an
a managed
OTT.
provider.
It's a OTT box, like a
OTT
Roku
box,
or Apple
okay.
TV.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done any work in the China market, so to be honest.
The US market.
In the U.S. market, our connectivity rates for smart TV is 65 to 75%. So and
Among the models that are capable,
right,
that's the
capable
percent
of
that
it,
get connected.
right. And of our lineup, we have some basic models which do not connect, and we have some models that are connectable. And of the lineup, I'd say probably about 60. Actually, this year it's closer to 75% of the models are connectable that we put out into the market.
It's a little bit of an unfair comparison. You don't buy a Roku, take it home, and forget to plug it into the internet. I mean, that's why you bought it.
Yeah.
So I don't know why you're only seeing 30% connection rates.
No,
Why
I
are the
think
people
some of-
buying?
I think some of the users said maybe, at least maybe let's rephrase it. I think it's interesting. Earlier you talked about the kind of 12 to 14 hours
Yeah.
that you're seeing.
Yeah.
I think partly that's what he's getting to, though, is if we look at usage of a traditional pay set-top box
Yeah.
today, right?
Yeah.
How many hours do I watch my
I see.
DirecTV box versus how many
Oh, I see.
hours do I watch a Roku box, right, or an Apple
Yeah.
TV versus how many hours do I actually use my LG native interface? I think that's a little bit of what he's getting at,
I
and
see.
that I think is interesting.
Yeah.
You guys are saying 12 to 14 hours.
Yeah,
for your
we're
box.
about a, depending on your denominator, we're about a quarter of TV time in our households.
Right.
And I don't know if we're actually predominantly plugged into input one, but we are definitely our user's first choice for device. So a Roku household will typically start with their Roku. Now they'll only end up viewing something a quarter of the time. They may fall through to their cable set-top box, but they start with their Roku. And we it's just a little bit speculation, but we think that's just a function of lovability. People would rather start there, start with an on-demand thing, and then fall through to their cable.
And then they fall through.
Yeah.
And just to give you a sense, because we just did numbers on this, so for traditional TV, you're talking 140 hours a month, basically 35 hours a week, right, from Nielsen.
Right.
And I assume in the case of LG that we're some fraction of that for using the native smart TV interface. At
Yeah.
that time, we're a relatively small piece.
I mean, the TV is pretty much always on,
right.
right? So for us, for me to start talking about, usage, I think it's a little bit different because I would literally be reporting on what Netflix usage is or what YouTube usage is, and that's not something I'm going to do. TV, it's on. You get home, you turn the TV on, you go to bed, you turn the TV off. That's pretty much the way people live.
Yeah, definitely. But thanks for the question. It's an interesting perspective. I think we're on one more question here in front.
Yeah, and just the whole idea of apps displacing the traditional cable set-top box intrigues me, only because broadcast television, whether it's over the air or over cable or over satellite, is a hugely efficient way to deliver content in a one-to-many sort of world. Do you really anticipate that you would be serving 100 million homes as the MVPDs are today with apps creating 100 million unicast streams around the country to view linear content?
Go ahead.
No.
No.
Okay.
I mean, the answer is it's much more efficient and less expensive for us to deliver a signal to Comcast and a bundle of VOD programming to Comcast than yes, when people watch through our apps on any platform, we're paying that back-end cost. We've got hosting, we've got CDNs, we've got so that becomes part of the model.
I speculate that an app is going to replace these set-tops, but in the real
I'm
world,
gonna
it's unlikely.
I'm going to rephrase your question. At what point, gentlemen, do you think a majority of viewing in the U.S. will shift to an on-demand modality? Whether that could be a DVR in the short term, but at what point do you think we hit a crossover where more TV viewing is happening on demand than off of a linear stream?
Well, we are. I mean, are we just talking about the TV? Because
No, all
TV viewing,
because
140 hours
streaming
a
has
month.
already hit the majority.
When do we
right?
hit a point where 70 hours a month are being consumed by users? I don't know the answer, so it's very convenient for me to ask you. But
I can't make up the future, but with my 3 kids in my house,
Yeah.
we passed that threshold
Yeah.
so long ago. That,
Yeah, so actually, Scott, I for folks, if you go hit the website, so I've actually gone on the record with TDG. We feel like that point is around 2020, where the crossover hits, end of 2020, 2021, somewhere in there. But that may include some live broadband streaming. So we're distinguishing between broadband and interest. The only thing I would say to your comment is the user doesn't care about content costs. And we do see the user could care less how much it costs the back-end guy to deliver it. And what I would say is we see is on second and third televisions in the house, bedroom televisions, not just in the US, but we have data from Europe and we have data from Asia, heavy migration to tablets for the bedroom, meaning additional television in the house. We see a significant cannibalization of the bedroom television in favor of tablets and other IP devices. I think we're about out of time. Can we take one more until they cut us off?
Probably a quick question. Do you see the real trend from consumers about anybody asking for multi-screen experience?
Depends on the product. For superhero movies, you definitely see usage and demand and people doing, more things at once. Other films, and I used to use this example all the time when everybody was chasing the 3D dragon, so to speak. We had this great film from Lionsgate for a number of years called Precious, and I used to tell people, I'd say the sequel's going to be shot in 3D. It's going to be amazing, And you have to always keep in mind, what you're going to use that piece of technology for and what you're going to do with it. Transformers 4, there'll probably be a couple of second screen applications that you'll see. Hunger Games, you got 2 more movies in there. Those Lionsgate guys they're smart, man. They're doing really cool stuff. You know, you're going to see stuff like that. But for other things, not as much.
For us, depends on the show. We do a lot of extensions of the brand. We do video games on iOS and Android and stuff like that. But also we have done, you know, apps that go with when you watch the show. I think we've done, and we see what the usage is. So we've done it with Storage Wars, where you can bid along or guess the value. We've done it with Project Runway, where you can vote on certain things. And we do it to engage the fans sort of in what's going on in the show.
Yeah, I think for those who were in that keynote, the Twitch thing is pretty amazing what they're doing in terms of closing that loop between the viewer and the participant. Thanks, everyone.
Right.